Michael, a white manager with many years of experience, could not accept that a new black manager, Jason, had been appointed as his deputy. The discrimination was brutal, from setups to outright sabotage, all aimed at getting Jason fired. But after a month, everything turned upside down. Jason was now running the store, while Michael found himself on his knees, begging for help. What Jason did next stunned even those who had seen a lot. But let's start from the beginning. Subscribe and like if you support the fight against systemic racism. Michael Shaw had been the store manager for nearly 10 years. He had built his career step by step within the company, starting from the lowest positions and gradually rising to management. He was confident in his experience and ability to lead the team. People saw him as part of the old guard, someone who always maintained order and upheld the rules. Michael believed he knew everything about his store and the people working in it, but everything changed the day the management announced the appointment of a new assistant manager. Jason Carter was young, ambitious, and clearly stood out among the other candidates. He had substantial experience in retail, having proven himself as an excellent crisis manager. But most importantly, Jason was black, and for Michael, this became a problem. He never voiced it openly, but his perception of his new colleague was immediately colored by prejudice. Jason seemed like an outsider in a system Michael considered his territory. On Jason's first day in his new position, Michael greeted him coldly. No welcoming smile, no friendly handshake, just a curt nod. Michael quickly showed that he had no intention of making life easy for the newcomer. All day, Jason tried to connect with the team, sort through documents, and learn the store's internal processes, but every time he approached Michael for help or advice, he was ignored. Jason felt invisible, as if his presence there was a mistake. Michael, on the other hand, was irritated by the mere fact that he had to share power with Jason. His old management style had always worked, and he couldn't understand why someone from the outside had to bring changes. He began to question management's decisions, but couldn't openly oppose them. Internally, he was convinced that this guy wouldn't last long, and soon he would return to the familiar rhythm of work without unnecessary changes. However, despite feeling the tension, Jason had no intention of giving up. He knew that the path to the top was never easy, especially for people like him. But his will to succeed was stronger than the prejudice he felt from his boss. Nevertheless, Jason couldn't help but notice that every move he made in the store was being closely watched, and every success or mistake was immediately discussed behind his back. The atmosphere was heating up, and both knew that this was just the beginning. A week after Jason took up his position, tensions in the store were gradually escalating. Michael expressed his dissatisfaction with the new deputy more openly. He denied Jason access to key documents necessary for making managerial decisions, and often delayed important reports. Whenever Jason tried to get to grips with his new responsibilities, Michael intentionally left out critical details necessary for completing tasks successfully. One morning, Jason received a notification that he needed to prepare a sales report for the last month. This report was the main tool for analyzing the store's performance and was essential for upcoming meetings. Jason started preparing the report, but quickly discovered he lacked access to certain data. He approached Michael for help, thinking it was a normal work issue that could easily be resolved. However, instead of helping, Michael gave him a dismissive look and dryly responded, "Since you're the assistant manager, you should be able to figure it out yourself." This situation threw Jason off balance. He realized that Michael was deliberately putting obstacles in his way. Jason decided not to show his emotions and calmly replied that he would do his best to handle the task. But inside, he felt a growing sense of injustice. He saw that Michael was putting him in a position where any misstep could be used against him. Meanwhile, the store employees began to notice that Michael was deliberately restricting Jason's rights. Some started whispering behind his back that the new deputy wouldn't last long in the store, especially with such treatment. There were rumors in the corridors that Michael was already developing a plan to get rid of Jason so he could regain control of the store. One day, Jason noticed that he hadn't been invited to an important management meeting. No one had told him the time or place, although he was certain that the meeting was related to his responsibilities. Later, he learned that Michael had deliberately forgotten to notify him, pretending it was a mistake. For Jason, This was the first overt act of discrimination that couldn't be ignored. Jason realized he was facing a far more complex problem than he had anticipated. This wasn't just about adapting to a new workplace, it was a confrontation with someone who was deliberately creating obstacles for him, driven not only by professional jealousy, but also by a biased attitude toward his race. As the second week of Jason's tenure approached, tensions within the team continued to mount. Store management organized a general meeting with all managers and key employees. This was important for discussing strategies for the upcoming quarter, and Jason saw this as an opportunity to prove himself and improve relationships with the team. However, Michael decided to turn the meeting into an opportunity to undermine Jason's authority in front of others. The meeting began formally, but soon Michael started asking Jason provocative questions about his vision for the store's development. He did this with a mocking tone, as if Jason wasn't qualified enough for his position. "Jason," Michael began with a smile that only seemed friendly at first glance. "What do you think of our approach to reducing logistics costs? Do you have any plans?" Jason knew the question was rigged to make him look bad. Everyone in the room knew he hadn't had enough time to fully delve into such a complex issue, as he had been dealing with other tasks. Nevertheless, Jason tried to stay confident and briefly outlined his vision, based on a preliminary analysis of the data to which he had access. Michael immediately interrupted him, raising his voice. "That doesn't sound like a solution to our problems. Is this what we expect from an assistant manager?" The room fell silent. Jason felt everyone's eyes on him. The tension hung in the air. Some employees began exchanging glances, clearly waiting to see how Jason would respond to this humiliation. He knew that any words he said now could be used against him. He took a deep breath and calmly replied, "I understand your concerns, Michael. However, I think that to accurately assess the situation, I need time and access to all the information that, as it seems, has been overlooked." Michael immediately raised an eyebrow and coldly remarked, "Overlooked? Maybe it's just that you don't understand how things work around here." These words sounded like a direct accusation of incompetence. For Jason, it was a low blow, but he knew he couldn't afford to show weakness. He smiled politely and said, "I'm still learning the processes, Michael, but I'm confident that in due time I'll be able to offer solutions that meet the company's expectations." The employees were impressed by his composure, though many could sense the tension between Michael and Jason. Nevertheless, the meeting ended without any definitive conclusions, and the atmosphere remained strained. After the meeting, several employees approached Jason to express their sympathy and support. One of them, Linda, the senior cashier, whispered to Jason, "Don't pay attention to Michael. We can see that you're doing things right. He's just afraid of change." For Jason, this was a small but important victory. He realized that not everyone in the store was on Michael's side, and that he had allies ready to support him in the fight for respect and justice. After the incident at the meeting, the tension in the store only intensified. Jason felt that with every new task, the pressure was increasing. On one hand, he continued to face resistance from Michael, who clearly had no intention of yielding. On the other hand, Jason felt a growing internal conflict. He constantly doubted his abilities, feeling that the environment was putting him in a situation where victory was almost impossible. Every day he asked himself, is it worth continuing the fight? On the surface, he maintained his composure and professionalism, but inside, emotions were raging. The fear of failure in the face of blatant hostility and hidden discrimination tormented him. Jason knew that if he resigned, it would be perceived as confirmation of Michael's claims that he was unfit for the job. But to continue meant constantly facing injustice and bias. Meanwhile, Michael continued to increase the pressure. He didn't stop setting more and more complex tasks for Jason, deliberately complicating the work process. Every day, Jason found that key information was unavailable, and employees who had previously supported him now appeared nervous and avoided open communication. One evening, Jason returned home more depressed than usual. He knew that his family had noticed the changes in his mood. The evening at the dinner table was quiet, and Jason felt that his wife, Letitia, could see his exhaustion and anxiety. After dinner, Letitia approached him and calmly asked, "You're ready to give up? aren't you?" It didn't sound like a reproach, but rather an attempt to understand his thoughts and support him in this difficult moment. Jason sighed, remained silent for a long time, and then quietly said, "I'm not sure I have the strength to keep fighting. Sometimes it feels like everything is against me. I'm trying to do everything right, but every day is like a new battle." Letitia placed her hand on his shoulder and gently said, "I know it's hard, but you didn't come here just for the job. You came to change something bigger. Remember when we talked about how important positions like this are to set an example for others, for our family, for our community? You know that if you give up, Michael wins. You may lose the battle now, but this war won't be decided so quickly. You're stronger than you think." These words made Jason think. His internal conflict didn't disappear, but he remembered that his work was more than just a personal struggle. It was part of something bigger, his mission to prove he deserved his place and that his success could inspire others facing similar challenges. Letitia added, "You've always been a fighter. I know you'll find a way. Tomorrow might be even harder than today, but you're not alone. We're with you, and that's more important than anything." These words from his wife restored Jason's resolve to keep fighting. He realized he not only needed to survive in this tense situation, but also to prove that he deserved trust and respect despite all the obstacles. The next day, Jason went to work with renewed determination. Letitia's words had deeply touched him, and now he was determined not only to deal with the situation, but to win it. However, Michael wasn't about to give up and was ready to deliver a new blow. Michael delved further into his schemes, planning to set up Jason and make him fail. He knew that if he could catch Jason in the slightest mistake, it would be grounds for his dismissal. Michael began tampering with employee schedules, secretly changing them without informing Jason. He also deliberately spread disinformation about deliveries and orders, creating chaos in logistics. One morning, Jason arrived at the store and found that several employees were late or hadn't shown up for their shifts at all. Customers began complaining about long lines and poor service. Jason, trying to quickly get to the bottom of the situation, checked the schedule and immediately realized something was wrong. There were serious discrepancies in the schedule that he couldn't explain. When he tried to contact the absent employees, they claimed their shifts had been scheduled for a different time. This day became a test of Jason's strength. Employees were irritated, customers were unhappy, and the store was losing money. Michael, noticing the chaos, stood on the sidelines with a smug smile, watching as Jason struggled to manage the situation. It seemed everything was going according to his plan. Jason looked like he had lost control. At the end of the day, the senior store manager decided to call an emergency meeting to figure out the cause of the disruption. Michael immediately seized the opportunity and began accusing Jason of incompetence, claiming he couldn't manage and had disorganized the entire store. "This is entirely on Jason," Michael said in front of the entire staff. "He couldn't control the schedules, didn't ensure that the employees were at their posts, and let chaos ensue. I offered to help, but he refused." Jason stood in the middle of the room, feeling pressure from all sides. He knew that most employees were also alarmed by what had happened, and many might genuinely believe that it was his fault. He realized that this was a planned attack on his reputation. Without letting himself be broken, Jason calmly raised his hand, asking to speak. "First of all, I want to clarify the situation. Yes, there were serious problems today, and I'm ready to take responsibility for some of them. But I want to note that the changes in the schedules were made without my knowledge and without my involvement. Moreover, I noticed discrepancies in the logistics data that were provided to me last week. I'm prepared to investigate this matter and provide the facts." The team froze. Jason was speaking openly for the first time about the game being played behind his back. Many employees knew that such large-scale changes in the schedule couldn't have happened without interference from higher-ups, and they began to suspect that Michael was behind it all. Michael, however, tried not to show that Jason's words had affected him. He merely sneered and added, "Are you trying to shift the blame to others? That's not worthy of an assistant manager. I think we need to discuss your future in this store." The meeting ended on a tense note. Jason understood that Michael had just taken the first step in attempting to undermine his career and remove him from his position. But he also knew that now he couldn't retreat. He would have to prove his case and expose Michael to the team and management before the situation escalated any further. After that tense meeting, Jason felt completely drained. He had the feeling that he was fighting on two fronts, against Michael and against a system that seemed to give Michael all the tools for manipulation. He knew that his next step would have to be careful and well thought out. If he made another mistake, it could cost him not only his job, but his reputation. Returning home, Jason was lost in thought. He sat at the table, resting his head on his hands, and quietly sighed. Letitia, his wife, immediately noticed his despondency. She approached him and placed a hand on his shoulder, gently asking, "What happened?" Jason initially didn't want to worry her, but then he decided to share what had happened at the store. He explained in detail how Michael had sabotaged his work, how he had tried to set him up with the schedules, and how at the meeting he had tried to portray him as incompetent. Letitia listened silently, letting him pour out all his emotions. When Jason finished, she quietly said, "I know it seems like the whole world is against you right now, and maybe it is, but you knew it would be tough. You always said that positions like these are important to set an example for others. It's not just a job, it's a mission. You're not just fighting for yourself, but for those who might follow in your footsteps. You have to stay strong." Jason nodded, but doubt still gnawed at him. "What if I don't make it? What if Michael gets his way and I lose my job? I don't want you and the kids to suffer because of my problems at work." Letitia smiled and replied, "We're with you, Jason. This isn't just your fight, it's our fight. You're not alone in this. You've always supported us, and now we'll support you. You made the right choice when you decided to stand up to this, and I know you'll find a way. Michael might think he's stronger than you, but his strength is built on fear and deceit, and your strength lies in the truth." These words meant more to Jason than anything else. He felt that despite all the external chaos, he had a reliable support system, his family. This gave him confidence. He no longer felt alone in this fight. He had a clear plan, not to give in to provocations and continue to do his job with honor and dignity, while staying alert and closely monitoring Michael's every move. Before going to bed, Jason went to his sleeping daughter and looked at her. He remembered that it was moments like this that kept him fighting. He knew that every step he took was important for her future, and for the future of other children who might one day face the same challenges he was facing now. And this moment finally convinced him that he had no right to give up. Jason decided that the next day would be a new beginning. He would not only deal with the problems Michael had created, but also start acting proactively. A big battle lay ahead, but he was ready. With the support of his family, Jason felt the strength to move forward, despite all the obstacles that were placed in his way. The next day, Jason came to the store with a clear goal: to regain control of the situation. However, the atmosphere inside the store was becoming increasingly hostile. Michael continued his covert campaign to undermine Jason's reputation, but now some employees began to openly take Michael's side. Among them was Tom, a young and ambitious employee who had worked in the store for several years and hoped for a promotion. He saw Jason as a threat to his plans and wanted to earn Michael's favor, believing that Michael could help him advance up the career ladder. Tom began actively undermining Jason's authority by spreading rumors among the staff. He told colleagues that Jason wasn't capable of handling his responsibilities, that he lacked sufficient experience for a leadership position, and that all the problems in the store had started with his arrival. Under his influence, some employees began to distance themselves from Jason, fearing to align with someone who might soon be fired. One of the key moments was a conversation Tom had with a group of cashiers during their break. "Listen, I've got nothing against Jason personally, but let's be honest," Tom began. "Since he came, everything's gone downhill. Schedules, deliveries, customer service. He just doesn't know how things work here. I don't see why we should suffer for that." The cashiers, tired of constant changes and the tense work environment, began to agree with Tom. One of the cashiers, Sarah, nodded and said, "Yeah, I've noticed things have gotten harder too. But what can we do? He's still our boss. Tom, feeling their support, continued. We can show management that he's not up to the job. If we all stick together, Michael will back us up. Management will have to take action if they see the entire staff is unhappy. These words began to spread among the employees, and soon many started to see Jason as the problem. The atmosphere in the store became even more tense. Jason felt like he was losing control over the team, and the situation was spiraling out of his influence. Several employees began missing their shifts, citing exhaustion and being overwhelmed, and the store's operations became increasingly chaotic. However, Jason wasn't about to give up so easily. He decided to act strategically. He began meeting with each employee individually, talking to them about the current problems and gathering their feedback. Instead of responding to the sabotage with aggression, he tried to listen to their complaints and figure out how to fix the situation. During one of these meetings, he ran into Tom in the stockroom. Tom was pretending to be busy, but Jason could sense that he was behind the recent rumors. Jason decided to address him directly. "Tom, do you have a minute?" Jason began calmly. Tom, crossing his arms over his chest, reluctantly agreed. "Yeah, what's up? I've heard you have some concerns about my work. I want to understand what's bothering you. Let's talk openly," Jason suggested, trying to remain friendly and not show any irritation. Tom, feeling defensive, frowned and replied, "Honestly, I just don't get what you're doing here. You came in and everything started falling apart. Maybe it's not all your fault, but it seems like you don't understand how things work around here. And it's affecting all of us." Jason nodded, listening to Tom until the end. He understood that Tom wasn't the only one who felt this way. "I understand your concerns, Tom. Believe me, it's been hard for me too. But I'm not here to make your job harder. My goal is to make the store better. If there are problems we can solve together, I'm willing to listen. I'm not your enemy. We're all on the same team." Tom, though not immediately, began to soften. He hadn't expected Jason to approach him with such an attitude. This conversation made him rethink that maybe Jason wasn't as bad as he had thought. Jason suggested they meet again to discuss specific proposals for improving the store's operations, and Tom reluctantly agreed. Jason knew that this conversation wouldn't solve all the problems immediately, but it was a step forward. He couldn't afford to lose control of the situation and had to continue building relationships with the staff, gradually breaking down the walls of prejudice and distrust that Michael had so diligently erected between him and the team. A few days passed after the conversation with Tom, and although the situation slightly improved, Jason knew that the problems were still there. Michael continued his manipulations and intrigues, and even the small improvements in relationships with some employees couldn't completely neutralize his influence. The situation was on the brink of explosion. Senior store manager Sarah Miller, who had been overseeing several company branches, finally took notice of what was happening. Sarah was known for her efficiency and strictness, and her appearance always signaled that serious problems had begun within the company. She preferred to stay out of internal conflicts, allowing her subordinates to handle them independently. But this time the rumors of tension in the store had reached her ears. The emerging problems had already started affecting the store's performance, and Sarah realized that she needed to step in. Sarah called Michael and Jason to a private meeting in her office. Jason felt nervous as he headed to the meeting. He knew that this meeting could be a turning point, and he was prepared for any outcome. Michael, on the other hand, was confident in his position. He knew that he controlled the situation in the store and believed that he would be able to convince the senior manager that the store's problems were solely caused by Jason's incompetence. When everyone gathered in the office, Sarah immediately got down to business. She reviewed the reports prepared by both managers and noticed significant discrepancies in their assessments of the situation. "I see there are serious problems in this store," she began. "Declining performance, customer complaints, internal conflicts. This is unacceptable. I need to understand what's happening here and who is responsible." Michael, wasting no time, spoke first. He laid out his version of events, claiming that the problems began with Jason's arrival. He cited examples of schedule disruptions, failures in personnel management, and issues with deliveries. Michael appeared confident, as though he were in the right place, and he didn't miss the opportunity to emphasize that all these problems had started precisely after Jason's appointment. Jason listened to his words, trying to remain calm. He knew that these accusations were not accurate, but he understood that he would need to carefully construct his defense. When Michael finished, Sarah turned to Jason. "Jason, now it's your turn. What can you say in your defense?" Jason took a brief pause and, gathering his thoughts, began to speak. "First of all, I want to acknowledge that, yes, there are indeed problems in the store, and I am willing to take responsibility for resolving them. However, I want to point out that not all of the problems arose because of my actions. In the past few weeks, I've encountered a number of challenges caused by both unintended and deliberate actions that have prevented me from performing my job effectively." He carefully but confidently laid out the facts, describing how Michael had tampered with the schedules, manipulated the deliveries, and obstructed his work. Jason provided concrete examples of situations where decisions had been made behind his back, or when he had been denied critical information by Michael. Sarah listened to his arguments attentively, without interrupting. After Jason finished, she thought for a few seconds and then turned to Michael and asked, "Michael, why wasn't Jason given access to key information? And why were the schedules changed without his knowledge?" Michael, momentarily flustered, tried to defend himself, claiming that it was all just misunderstandings and that he had merely been trying to help. But Sarah didn't seem convinced. Her stern expression suggested that she saw something more behind these explanations. "Misunderstandings are one thing," she said sharply, "but I see systematic problems here that someone is deliberately creating. If this continues, there will be consequences for all parties involved. I need cooperative work, not a power struggle. If this doesn't stop, we will have to take action. And believe me, the actions will be drastic." After these words, a tense silence hung in the room. Jason felt that although he hadn't won a complete victory, his position had been strengthened. Sarah had made it clear that she would be closely monitoring the situation and would not tolerate further conflicts. When the meeting ended, Michael left the office in silence, but his face showed irritation. Jason, however, left the meeting with a sense of relief, knowing that his voice had been heard and that now he had a chance to restore order in the store without constant attacks from Michael. However, he understood that this was just an interim victory, and new challenges lay ahead. After the meeting with Sarah, changes began to take place in the store. Michael could no longer openly manipulate the situation, knowing that the senior manager was now closely watching his actions. He was forced to be more cautious, and his influence over the team gradually weakened. However, Michael wasn't ready to give up without a fight. He just changed his tactics, trying to act more covertly. Jason, feeling some relief, continued to work, rebuilding relationships with employees and improving internal processes. He understood that now his task was to prove his competence not only to Sarah, but to the entire team. However, the tension still lingered. Some employees remained skeptical of him, and Michael continued to look for new ways to undermine his authority. The turning point came on one of the store's busiest days. A large shipment unexpectedly arrived at the store that hadn't been properly registered in the system. Moreover, the warehouse staff wasn't prepared to receive it. The delivery schedule had been disrupted once again. Chaos ensued in the store. Products piled up in the aisles, customers complained about the inconvenience, and employees scrambled to find a solution. Michael saw this as an opportunity to discredit Jason once again. He quickly gathered the staff and publicly began pointing out the mistakes. "This is exactly what I was talking about," Michael said loudly, trying to draw as much attention as possible. "Jason can't handle it. Every time something goes wrong, it affects all of us." The staff looked at Jason, waiting for his reaction. Some felt uncomfortable seeing Michael openly attacking his colleague again, but most still didn't know whom to believe. Jason understood that this was a moment of truth. If he didn't take control of the situation now, his authority could be completely undermined. Summoning all his resolve, Jason stepped forward. He didn't raise his voice or engage in an open argument with Michael. Instead, he addressed the staff with a calm but confident tone. "I acknowledge that there was a problem with the delivery," he began. But blaming each other won't solve it. We need to act quickly and cohesively to fix the situation. I suggest a plan. Part of the team will handle unloading and placing the products, while the others focus on customer service. I'm ready to help each of you. Let's not waste time on accusations and work together to get the job done. His words were firm and constructive. Some employees nodded in agreement. At that moment, several senior employees who had been with the store for a long time and remembered the order before Jason arrived stepped forward and said, "We're with you. Let's get this done." Support from the senior employees had a crucial impact on the others. People began returning to work, following Jason's instructions. The atmosphere changed. The team started working cohesively, and soon the chaos was resolved. The products were placed on the shelves, and customers were being served promptly again. Michael, who had expected the situation to spiral out of control, stood on the sidelines watching as Jason managed to restore order. He tried to hide his disappointment, but it was obvious. His plan had failed once again. For Jason, this was a pivotal moment. The staff saw in him a leader who not only acknowledged his mistakes, but was also willing to take responsibility for correcting them. He didn't hide behind excuses, as Michael had done, but acted quickly and decisively. That day marked a turning point in the relationship between Jason and the team. At the end of the workday, several employees approached Jason to thank him for his clear instructions and support during a difficult moment. Tom, who had previously been an active supporter of Michael, now stood to the side, watching the events unfold. He began to realize that Jason truly deserved respect, and that his opinion of him had been wrong. For Jason, this was an important lesson. He realized that true leadership lies not in avoiding problems, but in facing them head-on and leading others through even the most difficult situations. This experience strengthened his determination to continue fighting for justice and recognition, despite any obstacles that might arise in the future. After Jason handled the crisis in the store, his reputation among the employees began to change. People started to see him not just as the new assistant manager, but as a leader who could handle difficulties and make sound decisions in stressful situations. The turning point, when Jason took responsibility for the chaos caused by the deliveries and quickly restored order, became proof to many employees of his competence and willingness to fight. The next day, after the incident, several employees began approaching Jason to express their support. Linda, the senior cashier who had been with the store for a long time, was the first to approach him. "You handled things so well yesterday," she said with a warm smile. "I saw how tough it was for you, but you didn't give up and didn't blame others. That's impressive." These words meant a lot to Jason. Linda had always been one of those employees whose opinion was respected by others. Her approval could influence the entire team's attitude toward him. Jason thanked her for her kind words, feeling that his efforts were beginning to bear fruit. Soon after Linda, other employees followed suit. Tom, who had actively supported Michael until recently, also looked thoughtful. He hesitated to approach Jason, but finally gathered his thoughts and admitted, "I was wrong, Jason. I admit I thought you wouldn't handle the job, but yesterday you showed you know how to lead. It was hard for me to admit it, but you earned respect." Jason listened to Tom carefully and calmly replied, "Thank you, Tom. I know it wasn't easy. We all make mistakes, and I appreciate your honesty. I'm not here to prove anything to anyone. I just want to make sure the store works the way it should, and that we can all do our jobs in a normal environment." This conversation with Tom meant a lot to Jason. He knew that earning the trust of someone like Tom wasn't easy, but it was an important step toward improving the store's atmosphere. Gradually, the employees began to see him not as a threat or a temporary figure, but as a leader with whom they could work, and who was willing to listen to their opinions. Meanwhile, Michael, watching as Jason gained support from the staff, became increasingly frustrated. He saw his influence dwindling. The crisis and Jason's quick resolution of it showed everyone that Michael's old methods no longer worked. His authority was rapidly declining, and it was unsettling him. However, Jason didn't allow himself to relax. He knew that the situation was far from over. There was still a lot of work ahead, and although he had gained the support of some employees, he needed to fully regain the team's trust. He continued to monitor Michael's actions from the shadows and was prepared for new challenges. At this point, Jason decided to focus on strengthening his position and building a team based on respect and mutual understanding. He knew this was the best way to protect himself from further attacks by Michael and to take the store to a new level. Gradually, Jason's reputation in the store solidified, but the problems hadn't been completely resolved. Michael wasn't ready to give up so easily, and although his influence over the staff had weakened, he still tried to undermine Jason's authority. Soon, he realized that fighting Jason in the workplace was yielding little results, and he decided to take the conflict outside the store, drawing the media into the situation. Michael, taking advantage of his connections in local media, reached out to a journalist who often wrote about workplace issues and conflicts between employees and management. He provided the journalist with distorted information, portraying Jason as an incompetent leader whose actions had supposedly driven the store into a crisis. Michael also hinted that Jason had only been appointed to his position because of racial quotas, not due to his professional qualifications. A few days later, an article appeared on a local news website with a sensational headline: "New assistant manager brings store to the brink. Employees and customers dissatisfied." The article contained critical remarks about the store's operations, with most of the attention focused on how the store's organization had deteriorated since Jason's arrival. The journalist used anonymous comments provided by Michael to create the impression that the staff was overwhelmingly unhappy with the new deputy. This article immediately sparked discussions in the town. Some of the store's employees began to worry that this could damage their careers and reputations. Jason learned about the article when several concerned colleagues approached him and showed him the publication. It was a low blow, but Jason quickly realized that this was another attempt by Michael to discredit him in the public eye. At first, Jason was anxious and unsure of how to react. He understood that a public attack could seriously affect his work and future relationships with the staff. However, he decided not to panic and analyze the situation. At that moment, he had a thought. If the media could be used against him, they could also be used in his favor. Jason reached out to a college friend who worked at a local television station. This friend had been following Jason's career for some time and knew about his professionalism and personal qualities. After a brief conversation, they agreed that the television station would conduct an interview with Jason so he could present his side of the story and explain what was really happening in the store. The interview took place a few days later. Jason confidently spoke about his work, the changes he had implemented, and the challenges he had faced since starting the job under conditions of sabotage and covert opposition. He emphasized that his main goal had always been to improve the store's operations and create a better working environment for both employees and customers. He also cautiously mentioned the resistance he had faced due to racial prejudice, though he didn't name specific individuals. This broadcast was aired on the local television station, and the public's reaction was unexpectedly positive. People began supporting Jason on social media, commenting on his interview, and urging others not to give in to discrimination and bias. The article that had previously been written in a negative light started to lose relevance. Jason's support grew not only within the store, but also throughout the town. Instead of becoming a target of criticism, Jason became a symbol of justice and determination. He had proven that even in the face of hostility and injustice, one could not only maintain one's honor, but also win in the court of public opinion. Michael was furious. His plan had failed once again, and this time it seemed everything had slipped out of his control. Now his position became even more precarious, while Jason had gained strong support not only from the staff, but also from the outside community. Jason realized that in the fight for justice and respect, public steps were just as important as actions within the team. The media had proven to be a powerful tool that could change people's opinions and influence the outcome of the entire story. After Jason's interview and the subsequent wave of public support, the company's management couldn't ignore the situation any longer. The situation at the store had become public, and now it affected not only Jason's reputation, but also that of the entire chain of supermarkets. News reports and discussions on social media had become so widespread that senior management decided to conduct a detailed investigation. Senior manager Sarah Miller, who had already been involved in the conflict between Jason and Michael, was forced to take personal control of the internal investigation. This time the situation was serious. If the problems in the store were not resolved, it could seriously harm the company's reputation, which would affect its financial performance and public image. Sarah organized a series of meetings with employees to gather their opinions and facts about the store's operations and the role of each of the managers. She carefully listened to each testimony, not jumping to conclusions. It was important for her to find out who was really responsible for the problems and how to fix the situation. Michael, realizing that his plan to involve the media had failed, began to worry. He knew that if the investigation didn't go in his favor, his career in the company could be over. Nevertheless, he decided to stick to his defense, claiming that all his actions were aimed at the store's well-being and that the problems began specifically after Jason's appointment. Sarah called Jason to yet another meeting, but this time the atmosphere was even more serious. "Jason, I want you to understand that what's at stake here is not only your future, but also the future of the entire store. We need to be completely honest with each other," she said with a cold tone. Jason, already confident in his righteousness and the support of the employees and the public, calmly laid out his version of events. He provided concrete facts about Michael's manipulations, presented documents proving the changes in schedules and deliveries without his knowledge, and described the sabotage at work. Jason also emphasized that his main goal had always been to improve the store's performance and create a healthy working environment for all employees. Sarah listened to him carefully, without interrupting. After Jason finished, she decided to hold separate meetings with several key employees, including Linda and Tom. Their testimonies were in Jason's favor. Linda spoke about how Jason had changed the team's atmosphere and proven himself to be a competent and fair leader. Tom admitted that he initially supported Michael, but later realized he was wrong, and now believed that Jason deserved his position. Under the pressure of the facts presented by Jason and the supporting employees, Sarah realized that the situation with Michael had gone too far. His actions had not only undermined the store's operations, but also threatened the company's reputation. Now that the public was on Jason's side, further actions needed to be swift and decisive. The company's management received the report on the situation and decided to act. It was decided that a meeting would be held with Michael to discuss his future in the company. Michael, aware that his position was becoming increasingly unstable, tried to find ways to justify himself. But by this point, it had become clear that his influence over the team was completely destroyed. The company could no longer tolerate the conflict within the store. Jason had become a figure supported not only by the local community, but also by his own employees. The company's reputation depended on this conflict being resolved fairly and transparently. Michael was called to a meeting with senior management. This was his last chance to explain himself. The situation was tense, and the decision that would be made would change the lives of everyone involved in the conflict. Michael was nervous before his meeting with senior management. He understood that his attempts to discredit Jason had gotten out of control and now threatened not only his position in the store, but his entire career. Despite this, he still hoped that he could defend his reputation. His confidence had been shaken, but he hadn't completely given up. When Michael entered the conference room, he was met by the stern faces of senior management and Sarah Miller. Jason was also present, which made Michael feel even more uncomfortable. He was used to being in control of the situation, but now everything was different. He knew that under the weight of the evidence already gathered, it would be difficult for him to wriggle out of this. The company's CEO spoke first. He wasted no time on pleasantries and got straight to the point. "Michael, over the past few weeks, the situation in your store has attracted unnecessary attention, and this concerns not only the internal atmosphere, but also public relations. We have conducted a detailed investigation and gathered a great deal of testimony. Now we need to hear from you and understand how all this happened." Michael took a deep breath, trying to appear confident. He began by attempting to blame Jason, claiming that the problems had started with his arrival. He pointed to Jason's supposed lack of preparation, his failure to meet standards, and his inability to organize the team. However, his words sounded unconvincing, as everyone already knew that Michael had been behind many of the problems in the store. Sarah, unable to listen to his excuses any longer, abruptly interrupted him. "Michael, we have evidence that you altered the schedules and created problems with the deliveries to set Jason up. We've also received numerous testimonies from employees confirming that you deliberately sabotaged his work. How do you explain that?" Michael froze. He had nothing to say in response to such direct accusations. He knew that all his manipulations had come to light, and now it was impossible to deny his guilt. His face turned red, and he began speaking more quietly, realizing that he had lost. I was just trying to protect the store," he began. "I saw that things were falling apart after Jason arrived, and I wanted to prevent that." But these words no longer convinced anyone. Jason, listening to them, remained calm, though inside he felt that justice was finally being served. He knew that all the evidence was on his side, and now his main weapon, truth, stood between him and Michael. The CEO, seeing that Michael was no longer able to defend his actions, made a conclusion. "Michael, your actions have undermined the store's operations, destabilized the team, and led to unnecessary conflict. Moreover, your attempt to discredit Jason and your manipulations with the schedules and deliveries speak to your clear abuse of authority. We can no longer trust you with the management of this store." The decision was made quickly. Michael was fired with immediate effect. He wasn't given time to reflect or explain. It was a clear and final decision from management, which had zero tolerance for unethical behavior and sabotage. As Michael left the store building, he felt a sense of emptiness. His attempt to hold on to his position had ended in complete failure. All his plans had fallen apart, and his reputation was tarnished not only within the company, but also in the eyes of his colleagues and the local community. He realized that it was his own prejudice, arrogance, and racist tendencies that had led to his downfall. For Jason, this was a significant moment. He didn't feel any sense of triumph, but he felt that justice had been served. The store's team, watching as Michael left his position, now fully understood who truly deserved respect. Jason was the one who had managed the crisis and maintained his dignity, despite all the attempts to set him up. Now that Michael had been exposed and fired, new opportunities opened up for Jason. He was tasked with fully restoring the team's trust and leading the store to success. But most importantly, he had proven to himself and others that it was worth fighting for justice, even when it seemed like the entire world was against you. After Michael's dismissal and the resolution of the conflict, life in the store began to improve rapidly. However, for Michael, it became a serious blow. His plans had fallen apart, and he found himself in a difficult situation. Having lost his job, he was forced to rethink his life and actions. For many years, Michael had held management positions, feeling power and influence, but now he found himself at a crossroads. Realizing that his prejudice and manipulations were the cause of his downfall, initially brought anger and frustration. Michael couldn't believe his career had crumbled so quickly. He blamed everyone around him, the company's management, the employees, and Jason. He told his friends and family that he had been unfairly fired and set up. However, as time passed, Michael began to realize his own role in his downfall. Over time, anger began to give way to understanding. Left without a job, Michael began searching for a new position in other stores and companies. But in the small town, his reputation had already been severely tarnished. Many knew about his firing and the scandal that had erupted at the store, and no one wanted to deal with a manager who had been involved in discrimination and sabotage. This deepened his sense of isolation and helplessness. However, despite these difficulties, Michael knew that staying stuck in the past made no sense anymore. He began searching for meaning and hope in changing himself. The letter he sent to Jason with his apologies was the first step on this path. He didn't expect a response, but just the fact that he acknowledged his mistakes and asked for forgiveness gave him a sense of relief. Michael started seeing a psychologist who helped him better understand the reasons for his behavior. He realized that his prejudice and discrimination stemmed from his own fears and insecurities. He had grown up in a family where success was measured by dominance over others, and power was the primary measure of self-worth. Now he could see how destructive these beliefs had been. One day, during one of his therapy sessions, Michael realized that the changes needed to start with how he viewed the world and the people around him. He couldn't go back in time and fix his mistakes, but he could start a new path based on respect, understanding, and a willingness to learn. This realization gave him the motivation to move forward. Gradually, Michael began to change. He started volunteering at a local charity organization that helped people in difficult life circumstances. This work gave him a sense of purpose and allowed him to see the world in a new way. Interacting with the people he was helping made him realize just how diverse and complex people's lives could be, and that power and status were far from the most important things in life. During one of the charity organization's events, Michael ran into an old acquaintance named Richard, with whom he had worked in the company before. Richard knew about Michael's firing, but chose not to judge him. Instead, he invited Michael for a cup of coffee to discuss the future. Over coffee, Michael spoke openly about what he had been through since his dismissal. He shared his thoughts on how much his perspective on life and people had changed. Richard listened attentively and suggested that Michael try his hand at a new direction, training young professionals. He knew that despite Michael's past mistakes, he had a wealth of experience that could be useful to others. Michael was initially hesitant, but then decided that this could be his new beginning. He understood that he had nothing left to lose, and perhaps this was his chance to make amends for his past mistakes. He began collaborating with a local college, where he started teaching management and leadership courses. Michael focused on sharing not only his professional knowledge, but also the lessons he had learned from his life experiences. During his lectures, Michael spoke to the students about the importance of not only achieving success, but also being honest, respectful, and fair to others. He didn't hide his mistakes, telling them how prejudice and arrogance had led to his downfall. Michael tried to show that mistakes are not the end of the road if you're willing to learn and change. This new chapter in Michael's life became a form of therapy for him. He saw that he could be of use to others and that his mistakes could become lessons for a new generation of leaders. Michael no longer sought power for power's sake. Now his goal was to help young people grow and develop, and this brought him real satisfaction. Although Michael's journey toward full reconciliation with himself and others was long and difficult, he began to feel that he was moving in the right direction. He was no longer the man who tried to crush others for his own success. Now he saw the value in helping people grow, and that gave him real fulfillment. Michael hadn't yet fully rebuilt his life, but now he had hope and purpose. And although he could never completely undo his past mistakes, he knew that he could change the future, for himself and for those just beginning their journeys. For Jason, the time after his promotion to store manager was filled with new challenges and opportunities. He knew that his victory over injustice wasn't just a personal success story, but an example for others of how to achieve change while remaining true to one's principles. His journey to success had been difficult, but now that he had achieved what he deserved, Jason felt that his struggle had yielded real results. Under his leadership, the store not only stabilized, but also became one of the best in the region. The employees were motivated and engaged in the process, thanks to the support and respect they received from Jason. The store began to show significant financial success, and the company's management regularly used it as an example for other branches. Jason, in turn, continued to develop his leadership skills. He implemented training programs for employees so they could grow professionally and personally. Now his goal was not only to maintain the store's high level of performance, but also to create a work environment where every employee felt like part of the team and could contribute to the overall success. Jason understood that his strength as a leader lay not only in making decisions, but also in his ability to inspire others. In addition, Jason became actively involved in community initiatives aimed at fighting discrimination and protecting workers' rights. His story became widely known in the town, and many other stores and businesses invited him to seminars and conferences to share his experiences. Jason spoke about the importance of maintaining resilience in the face of injustice, even when it seemed that everyone around you was against you. However, what was most important to Jason was that his story inspired others. Local media continued to cover his work, and his name became a symbol of change and justice. People who had faced discrimination in the workplace saw in Jason an example of how to overcome difficulties and achieve success. He became a mentor to many young employees, helping them not to be afraid to fight for their rights. One day, after a successful presentation at a leadership and workplace equality conference, Jason returned home feeling fulfilled. He recalled the difficult times when he had been close to giving up. Back then, the support of his wife, Letitia, his determination, and his belief that justice would prevail helped him get through all the trials. Now, sitting at the table with his family, he understood that all of it had been worth it. Letitia looked at her husband with pride. "I always knew you would succeed," she said, holding his hand. "You didn't just change your life. You showed others how to deal with hardships and stay true to your beliefs." Jason smiled. "I couldn't have done it without you, and without the support of everyone who believed in me," he replied. "But most importantly, I've learned that a leader's strength lies not only in his decisions, but in his ability to listen and support those around him." Shortly after this conversation, Jason received another piece of news. The company's management had decided to reward him for his outstanding achievements in management. This was not just an award for good work, it was recognition of his leadership qualities, his ability not only to manage the store, but also to inspire others to change. At the award ceremony, when Jason was presented with the honorary award, he gave a speech. He didn't talk about himself. Instead, he focused on the importance of justice, equality, and supporting each other in the workplace. "This is not just my victory," he said. "This is a victory for all of us who believe in a better future, who fight for justice and equality. We can all change the world around us if we act with honor and determination." The audience greeted his words with applause. Colleagues and friends looked at Jason with respect and pride. He had proven that even in the most challenging situations, it was possible to succeed if you didn't give up and stayed true to your principles. When the ceremony ended, Jason found himself surrounded by those who had supported him along the way. Letitia, Linda, Tom, and many other colleagues stood by him, smiling and congratulating him on his well-deserved award. For Jason, this moment was the culmination of all his efforts. Now he knew that his story was not just a personal victory, but an example of how perseverance and resilience could lead to real change. Jason's final victory wasn't just in his career achievements. It was in the fact that he had changed the world around him, step by step, honestly and with respect for others.